Hi, everyone. Vasu Vaddiparty here for the VPartySports podcast, coming to you this Saturday morning, a little after 9 a.m. Actually, we're taping a little early for broadcast at 9 a.m. And we'll have replays considerably following right up until tip-off around noontime or so in college basketball for this Saturday. On this episode, we will have a little bit more detail on the NFL, the injury list. We'll have some NHL talk. We'll talk about a big day in college basketball. Every conference taking place within the conference, except for the Big 12 and the SEC. They're going to challenge each other. There's 10 games between the Big 12 and the SEC, and they're challenged 5 in SEC schools, 5 at Big 12 venues as well. So we'll talk about college basketball, a little bit about the NFL. We'll talk a little hockey as well. But we start this Friday. By the way, let me remind you, we'll be here Saturday and Sunday, 9 a.m. Eastern. The Daily Post will be at 11 a.m. Eastern after the show. Don't have all the lines yet for the games, but we have enough of the lines to get you started. Keep track of the Daily Post, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific time, Saturday and Sunday with the Best Bets segment, the world-famous, unprecedented, never duplicated Best Bets segment. Okay, as we said, 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific on Saturday, as well as tomorrow, Sunday, at 6 a.m. on the West Coast, the NFL Conference Championship Sunday. Everybody's fired up about that, the NBA, NCAA, NHL on Sunday, but a lot of NFL talk on Sunday as we anticipate the 2 games. The 4 cities involved, San Francisco, the Bay Area, Philadelphia, in Game 1 of the NFC Championship, 3 o'clock Eastern on Fox. Kansas City hosting Cincinnati at 6:30 Eastern on CBS in Kansas City, Missouri. So all 4 of those cities all fired up. 2 winners, obviously, go to the Super Bowl. So we'll get you those lines. We'll give you some injury reports as we get on. But let's start out with the NBA. NBA Friday night was a very interesting night. Not very many games for Friday night, only 5 games. It's because of the big schedule on Saturday. And we'll get you the ticker going across right now as we talk about the NBA. Here's the NBA ticker right now. Where's the NBA ticker? There it is. It's coming up right now. So the NBA ticker looks like this. The Bucks beat the Pacers 141-131. Not only do they cover, they go way over. Milwaukee's given up a lot of points, and Indiana still without Tyrese Halliburton and other players that are in there. As I look at the box score, Antetokounmpo, Giannis, 41 points. Drew Holiday had 21, 17 off the bench for Chris Middleton. He'd been averaging about 9 points a game coming off the injury, but he's coming off the bench as Connaughton, Grayson Allen starting for the Milwaukee Bucks in the backcourt. Brook Lopez had 15, 6 rebounds, but Giannis the double-double, 41 and 12. Indiana had 24 out of Miles Turner, 22 out of Buddy Hield. Again, no Halliburton, 21 for Ben Mathurin. He's going to be Rookie of the Year. Right now, if the voting had ended, he's going to be Rookie of the Year. Milwaukee covered what ended up being a 6.5-point spread. The over-under, 239, flying over 239. 272 points, the final totals for the Milwaukee and Indiana game. Indiana now 24-27 after the loss. Milwaukee 32-17 after the win. We'll get to the standings at the end. All right, one of my favorite plays of the day, the Grizzlies on a 4-game losing streak on the road. This is the last game of the road trip. They go to Minnesota. What an epic first-round series this was in the playoffs. Give me 7. Give me more. Give me overtimes. Give me as much as you can. This is beginning to be a rivalry week. In fact, the NBA coined this whole week as rivalry week. 111-100 win by Minnesota over the Memphis Grizzlies. Minnesota 3-point underdog. The total was in the 230s. It didn't get there. 236 the total, but 111-100. Anthony Edwards had 25 for Miami. John Morant had 27 for Memphis. Kyle Anderson, how about that? He started off great. 2 3-pointers to start off the game, got Minnesota rolling. I don't ever remember Memphis having a lead in the game as I watched that game intently. Minneapolis, Minnesota was my favorite play of the day at +3. And Kyle Anderson, 23 points, 4 of 7 from 3. His nickname is Slow Motion, and when you slow-mo, when you see him play, you wonder how he gets anywhere. But he's been playing in the league for a long time with San Antonio, UCLA product as well too. So he was effective tonight. Nathan Knight, 10 points off the bench for the Timberwolves. Bench production for the Memphis Grizzlies, nothing. They got 10, 16, 20 points off the bench, and that was over 4 players. But 27 by John, not enough. 10 of 21 shooting for him. Jaren Jackson had 14 points, but on 5 of 17 shooting. The Memphis Grizzlies were never really in this game. They made it close. They got it down to 8. They got it down to 8. They got it down to 6 at one point as well too. But when you're getting the 3 points, it ended up working out well. 13 of the 25 for Anthony Edwards to extend the Timberwolves lead in the third quarter. Shorthanded Memphis was without Desmond Bane, and they were out without Steven Adams as well too, their physical center. So 111-100, Minnesota over Memphis, an 11-point victory for them. All right, moving on in the NBA. The Miami Heat did not cover the 8 points. That was my other favorite play of the day. 110-105. Orlando, they play close games. They just can't win them at the end. At 19-30 now for the Orlando Magic. Miami, their in-state rival, 28-22. In this game, the Magic gave up a lead in the fourth quarter, a double-digit lead. And Miami came back. He thought they had a chance to cover the 8. It only got to 5. A couple plays down the stretch ended up costing Miami not the cover, but not the win. Banchero, Franz Wagner, Wendell Carter Jr., Markelle Fultz, all with double figures as starters. Cole Anthony off the bench. He wants to start. He had 19 off the bench. He tied for top honors with Banchero and Wagner for the Orlando Magic. They had the lead. Let me see. They had the lead here. I'm trying to find the box score here. They were up by 5 at the half after 1, up by 9 after 2. And then up by 6 after 3, and then they got outscored 37-26 in the fourth quarter. Needed a few more points, 3 more points for them. They needed to be outscored by 13 in order to get a push, but it didn't go that way. For the Miami Heat, Jimmy Butler had 29. He led the way. Bam Adebayo, 20 and 6 for him. Off the bench, Max Strus, 5 of 7 from threes, 17 points for him. Gabe Vincent had 11. Miami does not shoot the threes very well, only 10 of 33, but that was good enough. They only shot 46% overall from the field, even though Orlando outshot them 47% to 45%. They come up on the short end of the stick. So Miami, 110-105 winners over Orlando behind Jimmy Butler's 29. Oklahoma City, they were a favorite tonight, so you didn't know if they were going to win or not, but they ended up beating Cleveland 112-100. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, if you don't know that name, watch out for that name. 35 points, his 4th consecutive game with at least 30 in the 112-100 win. Darius Garland, they did not have Donovan Mitchell, did the Cavaliers, but Darius Garland went off for 31 points, but it was 10 of 23 shooting. Oklahoma City's defense held Cleveland to 44% shooting, only 8 of 29 from threes. Evan Mobley, 23 points and 11 rebounds. He had a double-double. And Karis LeVert, 1 of 12 shooting for Cleveland, did not help their cause. Besides the 35 points, 3 other starters in double figures for Oklahoma City. That was Jalen Williams at 17. The Aaron Wiggins, 10 points, and Josh Giddey, 15 for the Oklahoma City Thunder. They had a lead pretty much the whole game. They were down after 1. They were down big after 2, 54-47. And then made up for it in the third and fourth quarters, outscoring Cleveland 65-47, outscoring them by 18, coming into a 6-point deficit from halftime, 112-100. Cleveland now 30-21, Oklahoma City 20-25. Finally, the Raptors and the Warriors in Golden State. Golden State coming off that last-second shot by Jordan Poole Wednesday night against Memphis. They were down big as well, too. They were down by 2. They were up 1 at the half. They were down by 6 in the third quarter, but they got on a big run in the third. Outscored Toronto by 3, and then outscored them by 8 in the fourth quarter. A 12-point win is what it turned out to be, 129-117. Golden State was my other pick today, so 2-1 in the NBA for me. 129-117 over Toronto. Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet played 40 minutes each for the Toronto Raptors. VanVleet had 28, Siakam 21. Precious Achiuwa, look for him. He's a good player, and he's coming off the bench right now. They usually don't use a center. He's considered a power forward, but he's the only center they have right now. Boucher off the bench as well. He had 1 3, he had 7 points, but Achua 17 off the bench. Raptors only shot 45%, shot a little bit better from 3-point range. Meanwhile, the Golden State Warriors, 50 of 90, 55%, 56% 41% shooting from three, 129 they scored, with Curry having 35 on 13 of 21, Thompson 29 on 11 of 24, 6 of 14 from three, and then 12 for Kevon Looney, does all the dirty work, 8 rebounds for him. How many of those were offensive? Only one of them was offensive, but I think it led to a bucket. So 12 points for Looney, 15 for Kuminga off the bench. He hit 4 threes. Jermichael Green had 10 points, and then DiVincenzo hit a couple of threes late as well. 12 points for the Golden State Warriors. Andrew Wiggins did not play. He was not feeling very well, so they decided to sit him out, but it didn't matter. The Golden State Warriors, 129 to 117. All right, we look at the lines for tomorrow. A big day in the NBA tomorrow. We'll get these lines out to you right now. Don't have the totals yet. By the time the Daily Post rolls out, the totals will be out, but just wanted to get through these games. 3 games on network TV tomorrow, starting at 3 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Pacific. The 2-time runner-up MVP, Joel Embiid, will host the Denver Nuggets, and the 2-time reigning MVP, Nikola Jokic. Now, there's a lot of places that don't have a line yet for this game, and obviously no totals yet until the morning shoot-around. Embiid is day-to-day. Not sure if he's going to play. This might not be as good a game as it turns out to be. Looks like Jokic will play. Jamal Murray is day-to-day. Bruce Brown day-to-day. And then Michael Porter Jr. is out. That's a big key for the Denver Nuggets, who lead the Western Conference at 34-15. Philadelphia has won 6 in a row. They're 31-16. They're third in the Eastern Conference right now. Sixers are 26-20 versus the spread. Meanwhile, Denver 25-23 against the spread. But I would check that injury report. It's the first game of the day on ABC, 12 o'clock Pacific time, 3 o'clock on the East. Denver +4 at Philadelphia. All right, Brooklyn and the New York Knicks. Brooklyn a 1.5-point favorite versus the Knicks. The Knicks come off that big victory versus the Celtics Thursday night. Early total is 225, but 1.5 right now for Brooklyn. Any injury listings that we have? Ben Simmons day-to-day, TJ Warren day-to-day, Edmund Summer day-to-day. No injured players for the Knicks. How about the game Randall had the other night? 39 in Boston. They were down 15. They were able to come back, tie that game up, or get into overtime thanks to the Celtics rally at the end, and then end up winning in overtime, 120 to 117. So Brooklyn, a 1.5-point small favorite versus the Knicks. The Chicago Bulls, who lost to Charlotte the other day, they are going to Orlando. This is a back-to-back situation for Orlando after the loss to Miami. A 2.5-point favorite at Orlando. Javonte Green, Goran Dragic, both out already. Kevon Harris, Jonathan Isaac, the only injured players. I watched Orlando play. They can play with these teams. I'm interested to see what that total is tomorrow. But the Bulls right now struggling a little bit. They lost. They had a big lead on Indiana earlier in the week. They lost that, blew a 21-point lead. They had a lead against Charlotte, an 8-point lead at half. They lost that and ended up only scoring 96 points after getting 35 or 36 in the first quarter against Charlotte last night. That was the over I had last night. So that didn't go well in terms of the scoring from the second quarter on. So Chicago at Orlando, Chicago 2.5. Detroit 4.5 over Houston. Detroit just beat Brooklyn 2 nights ago by 8, 130 to 122. They've got things going on. That's the first game of the set of games that start at 7. By the way, the Knicks and Brooklyn go at 5:30 Eastern. That's also on ABC. We'll get to the triple header game later in the segment. But Detroit 4.5 versus Houston. Houston's got some problems. They can't stop anybody on defense. 18-29 against the spread. Pistons 21, 26, and 3 against the spread. They've only won 1 out of the last 5 as Houston. That was a home win versus Minnesota. And Detroit broke their 4-game losing streak with a win over Brooklyn Thursday night. This is a 4.5-point spread for Detroit going into tomorrow. The Hawks of Pick'em versus the Clippers. Clippers are hot now. When they get Paul George and Kawhi Leonard on the court at the same time, they're right there with them. But Atlanta's been hot as well, too. They've won 4 out of the last 5. San Antonio, the Lakers, Dallas, and San Antonio. Again, not great teams in there, but that Lakers win was a big win at Los Angeles on the 24th of January. Meanwhile, that's the Spurs. I'm sorry. The Clippers have won 4 out of 5. San Antonio, the Lakers, Dallas, and San Antonio again lost to Utah on the road. That game Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, I believe, did not play. Meanwhile, Atlanta broke a 2-game losing streak against Oklahoma City. They were 2.5-point favorite, 2-point favorite at Oklahoma City. Ordinarily a great play for Oklahoma City to not only cover but win the game. They lose 137-132 to Atlanta. But here we have the Clippers. It's an even game. Early totals have it around 230 or so, but it's going to be interesting because both teams are playing well. 25-24 for Atlanta, 27-24 for the Clippers. But the Clippers just seem to be more talented than what they're showing off in this 27-24 record. So I'll pick them. No total yet on that game. The Pelicans, a 4.5-point favorite against the Wizards. That'll be 8 o'clock Eastern tomorrow. 26-23 for the Pelicans. Remember when they were fighting it out for first place? Then Zion Williamson went out. Dyson Daniels is out tomorrow as well, too. They did get Brandon Ingram back the other day. Porzingis looks like he's out for tomorrow as well, too. Wizards 22-23 against the spread. Pelicans 1 game under 500 as well against the spread. But this is a 4.5-point favorite versus Washington. Last 5 for Washington. They're on a 4-game winning streak. Houston, Dallas, Orlando, and the Knicks. And then New Orleans, the last 5. They've lost their last 5. Minnesota, Denver, Miami, Orlando, and Miami again. So they've completed their Eastern swing with Miami and have 1 game against Orlando. So 3 games against the East, the last 2 against Western teams. Denver didn't have Jokic in that game. They were able to come back on actually, they did have Jokic in that game, but they were able to come back at home, push that line. That was Denver -1. It went up to -3 when Jokic came back. So Wizards, Pelicans, Suns, Spurs. The Sacramento Kings are -3 at Minnesota. We'll hit that one first. ESPN thinks that Sacramento is a 55% chance to win over Minnesota. We just saw what Minnesota did to Memphis tonight. Minnesota's at home. It's no Anthony Towns, no Karl Anthony Towns, no Taurean Prince. Sacramento has no injured players. They just lost to Toronto Wednesday night. This is the next game after that. I'm not sure how you can favor Sacramento on the road at Minnesota, considering what had happened. They lost to Toronto. They beat up on Memphis. Maybe Memphis is the common denominator. Philadelphia, without Embiid, they lost at home. They beat Oklahoma City by 5, didn't cover that game, and they beat the Lakers on the road on the 18th of January. Minnesota, the win last night versus Memphis. They've also beaten New Orleans. They lost to Houston, and then they beat Houston and Toronto. The Toronto game, they were an underdog at home as well there, too, and they got Toronto by 2 in that game. So right now, Sacramento, a 3-point favorite. Phoenix is 6 at San Antonio. San Antonio can put points on the board, and I was not impressed with the Phoenix Suns against a Luka Doncic-less Dallas Mavericks. They say 63%. Phoenix, without Cameron Payne, without Devin Booker, without Landry Shamet. Chris Paul is back. DeAndre Ayton had 20 rebounds the other night, but they could not shoot. Thursday night, they could not shoot. Sochan, Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, all day-to-day for San Antonio. They give up a lot of points. I'd be very interested to see what this total is. Phoenix does not run up and down like they used to back in the day. So these totals are very important in terms of what you think for an over-under play. Again, we'll have the over-unders. I'll post them in the Daily Post at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, so that everybody has the full NBA lines. Boston, 7.5 versus the Lakers. That's the third game on ABC. That's at 8:30. Celtics, 7.5-point favorite. We know what happened against the Knicks the other night. Big lead. Then when they got to a 15-point lead, Boston went 2 for 17, 2 for its next 17. They were able to cut into a double-digit lead and able to get a double-digit lead, cut into a double-digit lead that the Knicks had, forced overtime, but ended up losing in overtime at home to the Knicks. Boston comes in 35-15. Lakers are 23-26. Lakers got the win against San Antonio, got blown out by the Clippers, beat up on Portland, came back from a 46-point quarter against Portland. Memphis, the last-second win by the Dennis Schroeder basket, and then the lead that they gave up to Sacramento at home on the 18th. So there you have it, Boston 7.5. Utah 7.5 versus Dallas. It's already been designated that Luka Doncic will be out, so that's why Utah is favored by 7.5. This is a road game for Dallas. They do not play well on the road. Christian Wood is out as well, too, for Dallas. Micah Potter, Kelly Olynyk, the 2 guys out for Utah. Lauri Markkanen has been the story for the Utah Jazz. They have played the last 5. They lost to Portland on the road. Charlotte, Brooklyn, they lost to. The Clippers, they beat up. And Minnesota, they beat up their last 5. Dallas, meanwhile, the victory over Phoenix, lost to Washington at home as a 7-point favorite. Lost to the Clippers at home last Sunday. Miami, they got a big win over. They were an underdog in that game, too, at home. And then Atlanta, they were favored by 2 points, and Atlanta got them 130 to 122 in that game back on the 18th. So right now, Dallas, a 7.5-point underdog, no Luka Doncic, no Christian Wood. And finally, the Portland Trailblazers are going to get the Toronto Raptors. Toronto off their loss tonight by 12 to Golden State. Portland coming off a 60-point game by Dame Lillard. That was against the Utah Jazz, 134 to 124, 60 for Lillard on the 25th, which was Wednesday night. This is Saturday now, so Wednesday night was the day. This is the 28th. Yeah, this is the 28th. So Utah 134 to 124. They beat them up, and Lillard had 60. They haven't played very well in the last couple of weeks, and I'm not sure exactly why. They've got the talent. Josh Hart, Yusuf Nurkic, both day-to-day. Winslow is out for Portland, and then OG Anunoby, who left the game today, he's day-to-day. And then Delano Banton, who hasn't played very much for Toronto, he's out. But Toronto played well at Sacramento. They were playing well for 3.5 quarters, but then Golden State got hot. Curry got hot. Thompson got hot, which is usually what happens with the Warriors. Warriors starting to play well as well. So Toronto visiting Portland on a back-to-back after leaving the Bay Area on Friday night. They're probably already in their hotel beds right now, getting ready for the game at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock on the West Coast in the Rose Garden state of Oregon. The Portland Trailblazers, Toronto Raptors. All right, when we come back, we're going to hit all the college basketball. Lots of college basketball to talk about. Conference play, the Big 12 SEC Challenge, but it's all about conference basketball. We're halfway through the conference season, about 6 weeks away from March Madness and conference tournaments. So it's going to be an exciting time. Of course, the NFL is the big story for the weekend. We'll hit that at the end, and we'll also talk a little hockey before we hit the NFL after that. But college basketball, wall to wall, coming up in 30 seconds. I'm Vasu Vaddiparty. Don't forget to reach me at VPartySports on Twitter and Instagram, Vasu Vaddiparty on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks to everybody for watching and commenting on all our information that we give you. Don't forget, if you missed any of it, there's replays as well that are going to go up right until tip-off at noon Eastern, 9 o'clock on the West Coast. Big college games to start the day at noon Eastern, and then the NBA starts at 3 o'clock Eastern with the Nuggets and the Philadelphia 76ers. All right, back in 30 seconds. Vasu Vaddiparty here with the VPartySports podcast for this early Saturday morning. Welcome back to the VPartySports podcast. Vasu Vaddiparty here with you on this Saturday morning. Taped it early for Saturday morning, but if you missed any of this show with the information we've given you, feel free to download the replays. They'll be coming up right until tip-offs at noon Eastern and 9 o'clock on the West Coast. Don't forget, we'll be back tomorrow at 11 o'clock Eastern a.m., 8 a.m. on the Pacific Coast, ahead of the NFL Conference Championships, NBA, NCAA, NHL as well, too. We will get to all that in a second. All right, you see the ticker go across the bottom. We'll get you to the ACC to start off college basketball. Big weekend in the ACC. Clemson leads the way in the conference. They're 9-1 right now overall in the conference. And there's some big games tomorrow as we get to the middle of the conference season. You have the dates up here. Virginia, a 14-point favorite over Boston College, 124.5. Notre Dame, 10 over Louisville. Wake Forest, 3.5 versus NC State, 154.5. Duke, 9-point favorites at Georgia Tech coming off that loss Pittsburgh, a -0.5 against Miami. Very good Miami team, number 20 in the country. But Pitt has been playing well as well. But they're only a half-point favorite with 148 being the total. Clemson, who leads the ACC, going to a struggling Florida State, 7-14 on the year. Clemson 17-4, only a 2-point favorite. I'd have to look at that. That game at 5 o'clock on the East Coast, 2 o'clock on the West Coast. And then Virginia Tech, 6.5-point favorite against Syracuse. We look at the standings in the conference. It's Clemson at 9-1, Virginia 7-2, Pitt, Miami, and University of North Carolina 7-3, North Carolina State, Wake Forest both 6-4, as well as Syracuse, and then Duke at 5-4, and then the bottom shakes out with Florida State, Boston College, Virginia Tech only 2-7 in conference, but they're 12-8 overall. 1-9 for Notre Dame, having an awful conference year. Georgia Tech 1-9, and Louisville 0-9. By the way, Notre Dame, Mike Bray announced that this was going to be his last year of coaching. He's going into retirement. So there you have it for the ACC. The American Conference, Houston and Temple have been the stories in the American Conference. We've got 2 games tomorrow. There'll be some on Sunday as well. There's 3 games on Sunday. We'll get to those tomorrow morning. But as far as Saturday goes, Temple and UCF. Temple, a 5-point underdog at Central Florida. 5-point underdog, 133.5. Meanwhile, the number 3 team in the country, the Houston Cougars, who have as good a chance as anybody to win the national title. I'm not sure they're good enough as Alabama. Alabama did beat them on a true home court, true road game victory about a month ago on a Saturday. And then Purdue at number 1 plays really good defense, but I don't think they can match Alabama offensively. But we'll see how that plays out as the conference play goes on. Anyway, Houston, a 14-point favorite over the University of Cincinnati, who have had their moments. Cincinnati 14-7, Houston 19-2. Temple 13-9, UCF 13-7. Kind of surprising that UCF would be a 5-point favorite. I know Temple hasn't had a lot of success, but right now they're playing as well as anybody in that American Athletic Conference. Houston 7-1. Temple has the tiebreaker on Houston with that upset win in Houston last Sunday, 7-2. Memphis, who got a victory the other night, 6-2. Tulane 6-3. Cincinnati 5-3, and then it bottoms out at UCF. Wichita State, USF, East Carolina, SMU. Tulsa brings up the rear 1-7 in conference. So we'll see how that shakes out over the weekend. But the 2 games in the ACC, right in the AAC, I should say right now, are Cincinnati and Houston and Temple and UCF. All right, moving on to the Big Ten. 1, 2, 3, 4 games tomorrow in the Big Ten. We know what happened Thursday night. Michigan State pushed on a -2. With Iowa, I read where somewhere it was at 2.5 for some. So you didn't get the foul. You didn't get the late free throws. And then Purdue, a push also at -5. They win by 5 over Michigan on Thursday night. Saturday, here we go. Minnesota Northwestern. Northwestern playing very well. They could be a tournament team. They're 14-5. 7-12 is Minnesota, who's had just an awful time. But they've played better, and they've covered in their last few games. Northwestern 14-5. Minnesota 7-12. That's early. A 12-point favorite for the Wildcats, 129 the total. We know Northwestern's defense has played very well this year. Minnesota has a tough time scoring, but they may be able to stay within this 12 points. Northwestern, 2 wins this week after both games were postponed last week because of COVID issues on the campus and the basketball team. So they're going to have their 3rd game this week, and that's a lot for a college team, but here they are fighting it out at a 14-5 record. Illinois, a 2-point favorite at Wisconsin, 131.5. Wisconsin's problem has not been defense. It's been scoring. And Illinois has struggled. Sometimes they get on the road offensively. They're challenged. But they've got Coleman Hawkins who can shoot. They've got the big guy in the middle. He can pound it with the rest of them. But they're a 2-point favorite. Illinois 14-6. Wisconsin 12-7 right now. That game on Fox, 3 o'clock Eastern. That's the first of a triple header on the big network. And then Nebraska, Maryland. Maryland 11.5. versus Nebraska. Maryland 13-7, Nebraska 10-11. Nebraska's played well in spurts this year, but they've given up points. The differential has not been very good. And 11.5 points seems like a lot, may not be by the end of that game. And then finally, Indiana, the 3rd game of the triple header in the Big Ten, 14-6 versus a struggling Ohio State team. Ohio State has come off a couple of wins lately. They had the win. They lost to Ohio State on Tuesday. They beat Iowa. They beat Iowa up on Saturday. They lost to Nebraska on the road, and they lost to Rutgers on the road as well the previous Sunday. So they've been struggling a little bit in the last 4 games. So we'll see how that fares out for them. They're going up against a very hot Indiana team right now. Indiana with win over Minnesota. Mike Woodson didn't coach that game because of COVID. They whooped up on Michigan State last Sunday. They beat Illinois. They were a 6-point underdog at Illinois on a Thursday night, and then they beat Wisconsin 2 Saturdays ago by 18 points. They only held Wisconsin to 45. That's a byproduct of Indiana's new style defense, but also Wisconsin's lack of scoring right now. And then the last loss they had was to Penn State. They got beat up by 19 points on Wednesday, January 11th. But since then, they've allowed 45, 65, 69, and 57. So let me do some quick math here. 110, 179, 236 in 4 games. So that's less than 60 points a game that they've allowed. 240 would be 60, less than 40 points, less than 60 points a game against some pretty good quality opponents like Michigan State, against Indiana, and against Wisconsin as well, too. So a 5-point favorite, 145 the total. That might be high. I know Ohio State can score a little bit, but the way they've been playing, these games have gone under, and the way Indiana's defense is, 145 maybe a total to look at going forward. All right, moving on to the Big 12. They're going to have the Big 12 SEC Challenge. There is 2 conference games in the SEC. We'll get to that when we get to that graphic. But the SEC Challenge, Big 12 SEC Challenge, here are the Big 12 opponents in their home venues. West Virginia, a 3.5-point favorite over Auburn, 142 the total. Auburn coming off their loss during the week. They are going into a West Virginia team who had themselves a loss as well, too. Let's find that right now. West Virginia, Auburn, their last game, they lost to Texas A&M. They were favored in that game. They beat up on South Carolina. They beat up on LSU, who has really gone down the tank. They beat Mississippi State, did not cover in that game as well, too. So that's what they've had happen. West Virginia got a big victory over Texas Tech. Texas Tech has been awful in the Big 12 right now. They beat them by 15 points. Texas beat West Virginia on the road on Saturday, and then West Virginia beat up on TCU. TCU, a very hot team right now, but West Virginia took care of them. And then they lost a 1-point game at Oklahoma the previous Saturday, last Saturday, a week ago today. And then Baylor went into West Virginia and beat them the previous Wednesday. So West Virginia, 3.5-point favorite over Auburn, 142 the total. Alabama, who can be the number 1 team in the country, my opinion, the way they played, they had a tough game against Mississippi State, but a 6-point favorite at Oklahoma. Oklahoma very challenged to score, 146 the total. Alabama has shooters. They've got big men in the middle. Mark Sears can clog up the middle. Miller on the outside can shoot the 3. They've got it all going on. Quinterly at the point guard. They've got a good staff. They've got a good run and gun team, but they can lock it down defensively as well, too. 146 the total there. All right, Baylor will host Arkansas. 6.5 versus Arkansas. Baylor coming off their win against Kansas on Monday night. So they've had 5 days off since Monday. They beat Kansas by 6, put Kansas into a 3-game tailspin. We'll get to Kansas and Kentucky in the SEC part of this. But 6.5 versus Arkansas. Arkansas right now, they're on a little bit of a slide. They beat LSU, but who hasn't beaten LSU lately? They beat Ole Miss. Ole Miss is average. Lost at Missouri and lost at Vanderbilt, and then lost to Alabama. So those have been the last 5 games for them. Kind of inferior competition for the last 2 wins, and then pretty good competition for the 3 losses. Before that, we talked about Baylor coming off their win versus Kansas. 6.5 the line, 142 the total. And finally, the Kansas State Wildcats are going to host the Florida Gators. Kansas State, number 5 now in the country. That game at 6 o'clock, 17-3 for Kansas State. Florida, 12-8. Kansas State coming off victory, lost to Iowa State last Tuesday, but they beat Texas Tech. They beat Kansas by 1 in overtime. They lost to TCU, and then they beat Oklahoma State. So some decent competition there, but right now they're number 5 in the country. 5-point favorite against the Florida Gators, who come off a victory versus South Carolina, an upset victory of sorts at Mississippi State last Saturday, and then a cover against Texas A&M with the 3 at the buzzer. Otherwise, that would have gone the way of Texas A&M for you sports wagers out there, 54-52 that game. So Florida now 12-8 on the year, 17-3 for Kansas. So we look at the standings in the Big 12. It's Iowa State, Kansas State, and Texas, all 6-2. TCU, Baylor, and Kansas. Of course, Kansas on a 3-game losing streak, 5-3, and then Oklahoma State at 3-5, followed up in the rear by Oklahoma, 2-6. West Virginia's 2-6, though they got that win over Texas Tech. But here's why they got the win over Texas Tech. Texas Tech is 0-8 in conference and not playing well at all. Off to a good start for Mark Adams, the head coach, but they have not won a conference game yet. Come on, you guys. Who do you think you are? Georgetown? Shouldn't say that. Georgetown ended up beating DePaul the other night for the first conference win in about 18 months or 14 months for them. Speaking of Georgetown and the Big East, Creighton, a 5-point favorite over Xavier. Can you believe that? Xavier is getting no respect. They just went in to Connecticut and beat up a very good Husky team, though they've struggled in the last week. Creighton, a 5-point favorite because they've been hot right now. 12-8, started off 6-1, lost 5 in a row, and since then have gone 6-2. Meanwhile, Xavier 17-4, running and gunning. Sule Boom has been very good. Zach Fremantle's been good. Jack Nungy has been very good for them on the front lines. For Xavier, they're 13th in the country right now. A 5-point favorite, 157. I expect a lot of points to be scored in this game. Creighton, in their last few games, they beat up St. John's. Pretty good St. John's team by 32. They won by 21 at Butler. They beat Providence by 6. And they lost to Xavier by 3 back on Wednesday the 11th. So very interesting scenario for Creighton coming into this game. Xavier, this is the second time they'll meet. They lost to Xavier the first time 90-87 in that game. But here we have Creighton as a 5-point favorite. Xavier coming off that win at Connecticut, 82-79. They beat Georgetown, didn't cover against Georgetown by 13. They lost to DePaul on the road a couple of Wednesdays ago, and then they lost, and then they beat Marquette by 4 on the Sunday. So 3 out of their last 4 in the victory column. I don't know how they lost to DePaul, but they were 8th in the country when they did. And so now they're at 13th coming into the end of this week as well, too. All right, so the Big East, Creighton and Xavier. Marquette, a 9.5-point favorite at DePaul, 151.5 the total. And Seton Hall, 2 at Butler, 130.5. In the MAC, had one game in the MAC. Kent State won. They did not cover. They beat Buffalo tonight, so they are leading the conference there. Toledo, 13 over Bowling Green. Akron, 6.5 over Ohio. Ohio University, 139. Miami of Ohio, 6 over Eastern Michigan. A lot of points being expected to score there, 154.5. Ball State, -4 versus Northern Illinois, 144.5. Western Michigan, -1. And Central Michigan, 140.5 of the total. Let me give you the Big East standings before I forget. The Big East standings, did not mention them coming in. It's Xavier at 9-1, Marquette and Providence at 8-2, Creighton at 6-3 in conference play, and then Seton Hall and Connecticut 5-5 and 5-6. So big doings still happening. Might be a little too much for Seton Hall to catch Xavier, get up to the top, but they're definitely a tournament team. You can see 6 teams in the field right now. I'm not sure Villanova is good enough to get in. All right, as far as the Mid-American Conference, the MAC, the standings there, it is Kent at 7-1 after the win tonight. Akron 6-1, Toledo 5-2, and then Ball State 4-3, Bowling Green, Northern Illinois all 4-4. Buffalo after the loss tonight 4-4. I'm sorry, 4-3 for the previous 3 teams, and then Buffalo 4-4 as we get going. All right, moving on to the Missouri Valley Conference. It's really a good conference. Belmont and Southern Illinois have been the teams to beat right now. They're not playing until Sunday. Missouri State 1.5 favorite, 1.5-point favorite versus Murray State versus Missouri State, 1.5-point favorite, 132. Indiana State 6 versus Northern Iowa, and Valparaiso a 9.5-point favorite versus Evansville, 137.5. Southern Illinois and Belmont 9-2. Southern Illinois has the tiebreaker over Belmont. Northern Iowa 8-3. Drake Bradley and Missouri State all 7-4. Murray State comes into tomorrow at 6-5. Missouri State 7-4. Northern Iowa right there, 1 game back of Belmont and Southern Illinois. So it's a good race in the Missouri Valley Conference. All right, excuse me for a second here. I'm going through the college basketball right now, the Mountain West. Here are the games in the Mountain West. We've told you pretty much, we've given you the standings pretty much every time. But in the Mountain West, Utah State 4.5 at Fresno State. Boise State 8 versus Colorado State. Colorado State third to last in conference play. San Diego State at the top of the heap for the Mountain West. Take on San Jose State tomorrow evening, 13.5 there, 134.5. And then UNLV and Nevada Reno. UNLV struggling in conference play at 2-6. Reno right there with Boise at 6-2. And a game back of San Diego State at 7-1. 140 the total in that game. San Diego State, Boise State, Nevada. University of New Mexico, who got a win tonight. They did not cover that game, but they did win. They won. I'll find that score right now for you. They beat Air Force 81-73. They were an 11.5-point favorite in that game. And then Saturday, as we said, we got the 4 games going on. Utah State, top of the heap there. Boise State right there with them. San Diego State, and then Nevada Reno. All good conference play. The Mountain West has really shown its mettle this year. All right, we get to the Pac-12 now. Pac-12. Those games on Thursday night, UCLA blew a 12-point lead. They lost to USC. Oregon won over Colorado. Washington upset Arizona State in overtime. Utah beat up on Oregon State. We'll face Oregon this weekend. And Arizona, if you had 5, you got to push because of the 3 at the end. If you had 5.5 on some of these books that I saw, you lost in that last 3. Missed dunk with 5 seconds left. Go down, hit a 3 below the 5.5-point spread. So 63-58. Arizona beats Washington State. All right, Saturday. Arizona, 9.5 at Washington. That's a lot. Washington gave them a good game in Arizona. They only lost by 3 a few weeks ago, but 9.5 on the road. We know they didn't cover against Washington State. Washington State upset them early in the conference play. Arizona State, 3.5-point underdog to Washington State. Arizona State 15-6. Washington State coming off that loss to Arizona. Oregon and Utah. This would be a really good game. Oregon, a 4.5-point favorite against Utah. That's a 4.5-point favorite, 136.5. They did go into Salt Lake City and beat them early in the year. So it'll be interesting to see how Utah comes back because Utah is right there in the Pac-12 in terms of top dog. It's UCLA still. It's UCLA 8-2, Utah 8-3, Arizona 7-3 along with USC, Arizona State and Oregon 6-4 apiece. And then Washington, Colorado, Washington State, Cal, Stanford, and Oregon State all round out the bottom of the Pac-12. And then the last game, Colorado State at Oregon State, a 7.5-point favorite on the road. How far have the Beavers fallen in Oregon State? Because a 7.5-point favorite at home, Colorado State's not great by any means, but they're laying 7.5 points. Oregon State lost by 19 to the Utah Utes on Thursday night. You see the screen going across here for the back half of the NCAA as well too. Let's hit the SEC. They've got the Big 12 Challenge, so these are the SEC schools for 5. The conference play, however, there's 2 conference games going on. Georgia, a 10.5-point favorite versus South Carolina. Kind of surprising that it's that much. Georgia's played pretty well this year, but I'm not sure if they're a 10.5-point favorite over South Carolina. We know how bad South Carolina is, but then again, they did upset Kentucky on the road at Rupp Arena. Aberration, you say? Possibly. But 10.5 points. We'll see if South Carolina can stay within that. 136 the total. And then Texas A&M, after their loss at Kentucky during the week, they're going to host Vanderbilt. 10.5-point favorite against Vanderbilt. 141.5 the total. Before we get to the Big 12 Challenge, standings in the conference are Alabama 8-0, undefeated still. Tennessee 1 game back at 7-1. Texas A&M 6-1. Auburn 6-2. Kentucky and Florida both 5-3. Missouri 4-4. And then Vanderbilt, Georgia 3-4. And the rest. Arkansas struggling right now, 3-5. But they are a tournament-bound team probably. And then South Carolina, Missouri, Mississippi State, LSU, and Mississippi all with 1 win each. Mississippi State of that group has probably played the best of anybody right now because they played tight games. They played Alabama tough. In fact, they had a lead late in that game, and they played them tough. So Mississippi State maybe just getting some bad luck here in terms of how they're approaching it. So there you have it, the Saturday schedule for the SEC Big 12 Challenge. Iowa State, a 1.5-point favorite at Missouri, 141 the total. Texas Tech, a 2.5-point favorite at LSU. LSU has struggled since they got off to a good start. 133 the total there. TCU, a 2-point favorite at the aforementioned Mississippi State. TCU has been hot. They have been really hot in the last 2 weeks. But this might be a Mississippi State game. This might be the time for Mississippi State to get off the schneid. They played well out of conference, 131.5. And then Tennessee 6 versus Texas. Tennessee can stake a claim to be the number 1 team in the country. Defensively, they're right there with everybody else. Offensively, still a little challenge. So we'll see if Texas's offense can come through. 136 the total in that game. Finally, the WCC. Santa Clara, it's 12-point favorite against UOP. The Gonzaga Bulldogs, they have the 1 loss in conference to Loyola Marymount. They're 12 at Portland, 162.5. So I think Gonzaga is probably going to put up 80 or 90 points. Portland's can score a little bit, but I don't know if they'll be able to do this against a very good Gonzaga team that when they want to can play really good defense. St. Mary's, the only undefeated team in the conference, 6.5 points at BYU, 129.5. San Francisco 4 at San Diego. San Diego just came off the upset at Pepperdine. 4-point favorite for the Dons against the Toreros, 155.5 the total there. Both teams can score. Loyola Marymount, a 10-point favorite. They the ones of the victory over Gonzaga on the road. 1-point victory, 151.5 the total there on Saturday. So those are your games, 5 games in the WCC. We have those listed for you right now. And so it's going to be a very interesting college basketball Saturday. Of course, we'll have games on Sunday as well, too, and we'll get to those on Sunday. But a huge day, Big 12 SEC Challenge, all the conference play, ACC, the Big 10, the American, the Big 12, Big East, the MAC, Missouri Valley, Mountain West, Pac-12, SEC, us 2 conference games, and the WCC as well, too. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the conference play turns out to be here for Saturday basketball. All right, we come back 30 seconds. We'll do the NFL We'll do the NFL previews. We'll give you some more of the injury list, a little bit of the NFL news that came out today, considering some of the quarterbacks and some of the coaching changes, as well as the NHL before we shut down the show. Don't forget, Best Bet segment at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on Saturday and Sunday, today and tomorrow. And then we'll get you all set up for Sunday NFC Conference Championships at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific with replays to follow. Thanks to everybody on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram for your comments and your follow and your support. Totally appreciate it. Look forward to hearing from you as well, too. All right, Vasu Vaddiparty here at VPartySports on Twitter and Instagram, and also on Facebook and YouTube. Just look up Vasu Vaddiparty. All right, back in 30 seconds with the NFL wrap-up. Give you the updated lines, talk about some NFL news, and then we'll give you the hockey results from Friday and going into tomorrow with a full slate. See you in 30 seconds. This is the VParty Sports Podcast for this Saturday morning. Welcome back for the final segment of the VParty Sports Podcast for the Saturday morning. Don't forget, if you missed any of it, you get the replays. We're going up until about the top of the hour for this show, and then we'll have a replay right after that. And then at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock on the West Coast, and then 11 o'clock and 8 o'clock going right into tip-off, 9 o'clock on the West Coast, 12 o'clock on the East Coast with a big college basketball Saturday, huge NBA Saturday with a triple header on network TV. Fox Sports, where I have some affiliation with, has a triple header on the big network, and then there's also FS1 will have some games as well too. So check your local listings for all your games. Best bets will be at 11 a.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific today and tomorrow. And the best bet segment, the never duplicated, the unprecedented, world famous best bet segment at 11 a.m. Eastern today and tomorrow. All right, let's hit the NFL. Let me get to the NFL here a little bit. The updated lines, they haven't changed. Actually, it did change a little bit. The Philadelphia Eagles are still 2.5-point favorites, 46.5 the total versus the San Francisco 49ers. Couple of keys. We'll break it down completely on Sunday. Couple of keys. Who wins on third down? Can the 49ers handle a running quarterback? They did not in the game against Chicago, but that was a totally different team on opening day than it is now. Their linebackers can run. They held Geno Smith down. Jalen Hurts coming off injury. Don't know how much running he will do, but this is an elimination game, a conference championship at stake. Both teams have scored. Brock Purdy has been amazing. He's only had 2 road games in this stretch that he's had. One was at Seattle, who isn't great, and then one was at Las Vegas, who gives up 1,000,000 yards to begin with, though that game was close and they did win in overtime. But that's a rivalry from yesteryear, and so you knew the Raiders were going to play well within the 10-point spread that they were in Las Vegas, 46.5. All right, McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Elijah Mitchell, all resting, not practicing as hard. But McCaffrey said yesterday that there's 0% chance he's not playing. He's going to be in there. Elijah Mitchell will be in there as well, too. The key to Philadelphia stopping that game is maybe not McCaffrey as a running back, but more so as a wide receiver. They have a tough time with running backs coming out of the backfield. In fact, they're 31st, I believe, against running backs catching the ball, but their first pass defense overall against wide receivers and tight ends, and overall in terms of yards given up. You don't get to be 14-3 unless you have a good defense. Their pass rush is phenomenal. I don't know about their linebackers still, even though their secondary was great. They have masked a little bit of the linebackers, so we'll see what happens here. But San Francisco, obviously the 10-game winning streak to close the year. The 2 games in the playoffs, the Seattle game where they took over in the second half, and then the defense shut down the Cowboys in the second half last week. The big interception by Lemonnier as well, Lemonor as well, and then the Fred Warner interception right before the half that gave them the lead. So some of the NFL news and notes right now, 2.5 for Philadelphia versus San Francisco. Now, this line for Kansas City has gone up. It went from Cincinnati -1 to Kansas City -1, and now it's Kansas City -1.5. The total has gone up from 47.5 to 48. It started at 48.5 as well. So it's been moving around. It's a handicapper's nightmare because of the money going back and forth. But it looks like Patrick Mahomes is going to start. He's healthy. He's got the sprained ankle. So we don't know how much running he's going to do in this game. And that's the big key for Cincinnati. They've got a good pass rush. Their linebackers have played well. Their secondary has been outstanding. Eli Apple has come into his own. And their other cornerback has been really good too. Awuzie has been really good on the other side as well too. And their safeties have played well. Mike Hilton, one of the best blitzing cornerbacks in all of football. Awuzie at safety. They've got 3 guys in that secondary that can make the Pro Bowl. If they win, obviously they won't play in the Pro Bowl, but they'll go to the Super Bowl. But it's going to be an interesting game. Mahomes is healthy. Hayden Hurst, we just found out with his calf, he'll play in the AFC title game as well too. So obviously the Super Bowl on the line here, 1.5 for Kansas City. How do they get to Mahomes? Does he run as much as he's used to? His scrambling ability is what keeps plays alive, and then he ends up finding receivers down the field, throws from all angles. We know all that. We've watched them enough for the last 5 years. They are the 1 seed. They're at home. It's going to be rocking in Kansas City on Sunday afternoon. They're the late game, 6:30 Eastern on CBS. Cincinnati has the 3 wide receivers. Can their secondary cover them? Jacksonville, they give up a lot of points, but overall, the yards-wise, they don't do a lot yards-wise, but they're middle of the pack defensively in points scored. So it'll be interesting to see if Joe Burrow gets the protection from the Kansas City pass rush. Chris Jones is there. 49ers fans remember him from the Super Bowl. And also this year when Kansas City went into San Francisco. That was their last loss of the year for the 49ers was against Kansas City. I believe that's right. Let's say that's right. I thought it was the Atlanta game, but I want to make sure about that before we move on here. It was the Chiefs. Chiefs were the last loss that they had. They were 3-4 at that point. Then they've gone on to win 10 in a row. And then the 2 playoff games, the Seahawks, they gave up 23 and they gave up 12 points to the Cowboys, so 35 in the last 2 games. Meanwhile, Philadelphia, the games they lost, Gardner Minshew started 2 of those games for Philadelphia as well too. So a great matchup. We'll break it all down. Some injury news. Cincinnati will be without Alex Capps and Jonah Williamson. He will be out as well too. Let me see if I got this right. The injuries, they'll have it right here. Jonah Williams, the offensive tackle, left tackle, is out. Alex Kappa, the guard, is out. That was announced today. Meanwhile, on the Kansas City side, Travis Kelce's questionable. I'm pretty sure he's going to play. Mecole Hardman, they're not sure about him. And Justin Watson has been very effective for Patrick Mahomes as a third receiver. He'll probably play, but he's listed as questionable as well today. So that's where you have that. Let's go to the injury report for the 49ers and Eagles here too. It says Ambry Thomas, Elijah Mitchell questionable. Only the offensive tackle, Brett Tott, backup tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. Brett Tott is out. 49ers 13-6 against the spread. Eagles 9-9 against the spread this year, as they did cover against the Giants last week. 49ers have covered both games in the playoffs this year. 13-4 regular season, 13-6 overall against the points this season. All right, so you're all set up for Sunday. Full preview. We'll break down position by position. We'll get you all the news and notes going into Championship Sunday for the AFC Championship. That's the late game. The NFC Championship is the first game. It all gets started at 3 o'clock Eastern on Fox with the NFC Championship, and then it'll roll right into 6:30 Eastern on CBS for Kansas City and Cincinnati. All right, last thing before we go, let's get some hockey news out of the way. These are the lines for tomorrow in hockey. Colorado, St. Louis. Big lines here, 225-6. Boston at Florida. Boston off their loss to Tampa, 165, 6.5. Ottawa, 195 versus Montreal. The Kings got a big win at Florida, but this is back-to-back. Tampa Bay now 220 favorite, 6 the total. Winnipeg, 220 favorite versus Philadelphia. Winnipeg off that loss off to Buffalo is a 180 favorite. Pittsburgh will take on San Jose back-to-back for the Sharks after the overtime loss to Carolina today. They go to Pittsburgh, 255 the favorites for Pittsburgh, 6.5 there. The Islanders are even with the Las Vegas Golden Knights, 6 the total there. Minnesota, 185 versus Buffalo. They played well, 6.5 the total there. And here you go, Edmonton, a 420 favorite, 6.5 the total. We just told you about Chicago, what they did to Calgary as a 310 underdog. They beat them 5-1. Of course, Anaheim beat up on Colorado as a $3 underdog as well too. So be careful with these lines. It's a lot to talk about in terms of the lines that go on in the NHL, as we're about halfway through the season in both the NHL, the NBA conference season in college is about halfway through as well, and then conference championships in the AFC and NFC for the NFL on Sunday. All right, don't forget, we'll be back 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific on Sunday. The Daily Post will be at 11 a.m. Daily Post will be at 11 a.m. If I find it here. Daily Post at 11 a.m., 8 a.m. Pacific time on Sunday. The Best Bet segment will come out. We'll have the updated lines for you in terms of totals for the NBA on Saturday. Same for Sunday. A lot of good college basketball early Sunday and some good NBA as well on Sunday. But the big days tomorrow, all that college basketball wall-to-wall, all that NBA wall-to-wall, all the NHL wall-to-wall from noon Eastern all the way through about midnight and later on the West Coast and East Coast as far as times go. All right. I'm Vasu Vaddiparty. You can reach me at VPartySports on Twitter and Instagram, Vasu Vaddiparty on Facebook and YouTube. 9 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, 6 a.m. Pacific. If you miss any of this show, tune into the replays. Don't forget about the Daily Post, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. And also, we will see you Sunday. Same time frames for all that as well, too. Big day in college basketball. Cannot wait. I'll be up north covering a basketball game, but you'll get your Daily Post at 11 a.m. Eastern. And then Sunday, not sure where I'll be Sunday, whether I'll be back in the studio here in San Jose or in Seattle from a hotel room, trying to get you caught up for all the Sunday action. We'll let you know. You'll know when you see me. But until then, we will see you 9 a.m. Eastern Sunday. Until then, have a great day on Saturday. Good luck with all your games. Good luck with all your action. I cannot wait. NBA Saturday, NCAA Saturday, some NHL games to talk about. Daily Post at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. That's the VParty Sports Podcast for today. I'm your host, Vasu Vaddiparty. We will see you tomorrow. Also, replays coming up, the Daily Post at 11 a.m. Take care, everybody. Have a great Saturday, and we'll see you tomorrow.